You didn't walk away, but you've stopped showing up the way you used to. You don't smile like you used to. You don't feel seen in the spaces that once felt sacred. And lately, it feels like Allah is removing you, not from people, but from a version of yourself that couldn't survive there anymore. This isn't you giving up. This is Allah pulling you out. And what feels like loss might just be the beginning of who you were always meant to become. My dear brother, my beloved sister, sometimes it's not a choice. You didn't walk away. You were dragged away. Quietly, painfully, invisibly. 1. Your soul no longer submits to that atmosphere. You keep returning to the same place, to the same room, the same people, the same circle that once made you feel alive. And yet, every time you walk in now, you feel like a guest in your own life. The smiles still greet you, the jokes still echo. But you're not there anymore. You laugh, but it doesn't land. You speak, but it doesn't hit the heart. You try to connect, but it feels like reaching across a glass wall no one else can see. And maybe you're wondering what changed. Why everything that once felt like home now feels foreign. As if someone turned down the volume on your spirit the moment you entered that place. It's not them. It's not even you being cold. It's Allah. Quietly, gently, divinely, lifting your soul out of a place your body hasn't yet left. You see, there was a time when that environment matched your spiritual frequency. When your iman was weak, it didn't hurt to be there. When your heart was numb, the noise didn't bother you. When your light was small, you didn't notice the shadows. But now your soul is waking up. Now your light is trying to grow. And that same place, that same energy now feels tight, distant, heavy, because the version of you that once fit perfectly there no longer exists. It's like wearing clothes you've outgrown. They still fit, technically, but they're uncomfortable, restricting, wrong. You're not trying to be different. You're just becoming real. And the real you, the one Allah is slowly shaping, can no longer breathe where your heart used to suffocate quietly just to belong. You try to force it, to blend in again, to smile through the awkwardness. But your soul resists. It resists not out of pride, but out of protection, because Allah is pulling you out from what you thought you needed, to show you that your growth will never be celebrated in a space that was built to contain your wounds. This isn't about ego. It's about elevation, about recognizing that what once gave you warmth has become a ceiling. And Allah doesn't write ceilings over souls. He wants to fly. That's why you feel out of place. That's why the laughter feels hollow. That's why your silence in those rooms now feels heavier than your presence. He's not isolating you. He's inviting you to something higher, to something real, to a peace that doesn't require pretending, to a light that doesn't dim when you walk into the room. And yes, it hurts. To feel distant from what used to define you, to watch familiar faces feel unfamiliar, to silently grieve a space you once begged to stay in. But growth always starts with spiritual tension, with divine discomfort, with a gentle unease that whispers, "This is no longer for you." That whisper isn't weakness, it's a mercy. It's Allah pulling your heart before He moves your feet. So when you finally walk away, you don't carry guilt. You carry permission. Permission to become. Permission to rise. Permission to leave behind what your soul no longer bows to. Because you were not created to shrink in spaces you've already outgrown. You were created to submit to Allah fully, not environments that ask you to dim your truth just to be accepted. So if you feel like your soul no longer submits to that atmosphere, don't force it. Don't stay out of loyalty to what no longer feeds you. Don't apologize for becoming the person your du'as begged Allah to help you grow into. Because when Allah starts to elevate you, He first makes the old space feel uncomfortable. Then He makes it feel unbearable. And finally, He gives you peace in walking away. That's not rebellion. That's obedience to His unseen plan. Let go. Not because they were bad, but because Allah is preparing a new place where your soul can finally breathe. And you'll know you're almost there when you stop fighting to belong and start longing to surrender. 2. The person you loved no longer recognizes your growth. There was a time when their eyes lit up when they saw you, when your laughter was the language you both spoke without effort, when your presence brought them peace, and their presence made you feel chosen. You thought you'd grow together. You thought they'd always see you. But something shifted, and you don't know exactly when it happened. But one day you looked into their eyes and realized they weren't looking at you anymore. They were looking past you, not because you became less, but because Allah had been quietly making you more. You started to change. You stopped chasing attention and started seeking meaning. You started praying more, reflecting more, dreaming deeper. You became softer in ways they didn't notice, and stronger in ways they couldn't handle. You stopped laughing at the jokes that once felt harmless. You stopped showing up to places that drained you. You started choosing silence over small talk, solitude over noise, purpose over approval. And they began to feel like strangers around you. They couldn't recognize the new parts of you because they were still attached to the older version, the version you had to bury just to survive. And it hurt. To watch someone you love look confused by your healing, to feel their energy shift when your spirit started shining differently, to sense their discomfort around your peace, like your growth made them question their own stillness. They didn't say anything out loud, but you felt it, in the distance between messages, in the silence between conversations, in the way they looked at you like you were becoming something unreachable. And for a while, you tried to shrink back down, to laugh like before, to agree just to keep the connection alive, to apologize for changing. But every time you did, your soul ached, because once Allah shows you who you're becoming, He doesn't let you go back to who you were, just to make someone else feel comfortable. The truth is, not everyone who loved the older version of you was meant to stay for the one Allah is rebuilding. Some people were sent to witness your brokenness, but not your restoration. Some were sent to hold your hand in the dark, but they were never written to walk beside you when the light came. It's painful, because you still love them, still pray for them, still carry pieces of them in your du'as. But loving someone doesn't always mean walking forward with them. Sometimes it means letting go with grace, so your soul can finally stretch into what it was always meant to become. Allah saw how loyal you were, how you gave your best, how you kept showing up even when the connection no longer fed you. But He also saw how much of yourself you were sacrificing just to keep a bond that wasn't growing with you. And so, He allowed distance, not to punish either of you, but to preserve your transformation, because He knew that the new you could not exist in a space that kept trying to drag you back into old wounds. So if you feel unseen now, if the person who once loved you no longer understands you, it's not always betrayal. Sometimes it's just misalignment. Your soul is elevating, and theirs is still circling where you used to be. And that's okay. It doesn't make them bad. It doesn't make you better. It just means your paths were written to meet, but not to merge forever. And one of the hardest parts of growth is learning to accept that some souls were only sent for a chapter, not the conclusion. Let them go in peace, without bitterness, without blame, because Allah never subtracts without preparing a divine replacement. And what's ahead will never feel threatened by your becoming. You don't need to shrink to be loved. You don't need to dim to stay seen. You are allowed to outgrow a love that no longer sees your light. And when that love fades, Allah will replace it with something that doesn't just recognize your growth, but protects it. 3. You're constantly being delayed from returning. You keep trying to go back to what once felt safe, back to the place where it all started, back to the people who once knew your name before the pain. And every time you try, something stops you. The plan breaks. The car doesn't start. You get sick. They don't respond. Or you just feel this heavy, invisible pull in your chest that whispers, "Not this time, not anymore." You blame timing. You blame your luck. You think, maybe I'm overthinking. But you're not. You're not being blocked by life. You're being protected by Allah. There's something sacred about how Allah delays your return. Not with thunder, not with signs written in the sky, but with tiny disruptions, quiet misalignments, emotional resistance that makes no sense, but won't go away. And the more you ignore it, the heavier it feels, because somewhere inside, your soul already knows you're not supposed to go back there, not because it's dangerous, not because it's evil, but because your growth can't survive there anymore. Your new soul doesn't belong in a place where the old version of you was formed in pain. You keep remembering the good times, the way it used to feel. You replay memories like they're proof that maybe you're meant to return. But you forget. Allah didn't save you from that place just to send you back the moment you got stronger. He didn't heal you just to have you bleed in the same environment again. He didn't build you quietly through heartbreak just to watch you fall into old patterns. That delay you feel, that blocked message, that trip that keeps being postponed, that call you almost made but never sent, all of it is divine mercy in disguise. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't walking forward into the unknown. It's returning to a past you romanticized, forgetting that it once made you beg Allah for an escape. And Allah heard you. He saw those nights when you asked Him to remove what was draining you, to take away what wasn't real, to close the doors that led nowhere. He didn't forget. You did. You forgot how tired you were, how empty it made you feel, how many times you broke and patched yourself back together in silence. And now, when you try to return, He delays you. Again, and again, and again. Not to punish you, but because your soul is too precious to be given back to a past that no longer honors it, even if your heart still misses it. Allah knows what your future needs more than what your memory wants. You don't see the full picture. You don't know what's waiting behind that door you keep trying to open. But He does. And sometimes, the greatest form of divine love is a delay that doesn't make sense right now, but will save your future self from collapse. So, if everything keeps stopping you from returning, let it. Don't fight the friction. Don't force the return. Because maybe what you're calling a delay is actually your rescue. A rescue from becoming someone you already outgrew. A rescue from settling into something that was never meant to carry the new you. A rescue from walking back into a space where your peace would have slowly started dying again. Allah is not ignoring your prayers. He's guarding their answers. And when He's ready, He won't make you chase what's meant for you. He'll align it, clearly, peacefully, powerfully. But if He keeps closing the road behind you, it's because what's ahead is greater than everything you left behind. So, trust the delay. Even if your heart wants to return, even if your mind keeps asking questions, even if your memory is replaying what felt good, because Allah sees what's hidden. And He's not just moving you forward, He's keeping you safe. 4. Your identity feels misunderstood in familiar spaces. You walk into the room, with the same people. The ones who used to make you laugh until your stomach hurt. The ones who once said, "You'll never have to pretend here. This is your home." And yet, now you enter silently. You sit quieter. You observe more than you speak. Not because you're cold, but because somewhere along the way, you stopped feeling known. They still greet you the same. They still call your name with familiarity. But when they look at you now, you can feel it. They don't really see you anymore. Not the new you. Not the you that prays more than you post. Not the you that no longer finds comfort in gossip. Not the you that keeps choosing peace over performance. Not the you that's healing, slowly, sacredly, silently. They keep responding to who you used to be, as if your growth is a phase, as if your light is temporary, as if this new calmness in you is something to be fixed. And every time you try to share a glimpse of the new you, they change the subject, or laugh it off, or give you that look, the one that says, "We liked you better when you were one of us." And that's when the ache sets in, because you never left them. You just became someone else while they stayed the same. You didn't outgrow the friendship. You just outgrew the version of you they were most comfortable with. Now your silence feels awkward. Your presence feels heavy. Your inner light feels like a spotlight you never asked for. You're not judging them. You're not bitter. You just don't feel safe there anymore. You feel misunderstood. Not because they hate you, but because they've chosen to remember you as the version who laughed at everything, agreed with everything, and never challenged their comfort. And now that you've stopped performing, they've stopped connecting. That's the quiet loneliness that no one talks about. The heartbreak of becoming someone better, only to feel more invisible in the rooms that once called you family. And maybe part of you is tempted to go back, to play the role again, to laugh at things you don't find funny, to dim your light just enough to make everyone else feel warm again. But your soul can't do it anymore. It won't, because Allah has changed you too deeply to pretend again. He's pulled your heart into a new rhythm, a new calmness, a new type of clarity that no longer fits the old volume of that space. It's not arrogance. It's not distance. It's protection. And it's real. You've prayed for peace. You've begged Allah to guide you. And now He's answering, by making you uncomfortable in the places that were never meant to hold the next version of your soul. So if you walk into rooms that once felt like home, but now feel like performance stages, don't ignore it. That discomfort isn't your fault. It's your soul growing out of an identity you wore just to feel accepted. You're not meant to keep shrinking just so others won't feel insecure. You're not meant to explain your evolution to those who loved your wounds more than your healing. You are allowed to outgrow people who never took the time to understand the new you. You are allowed to be misunderstood by those who only loved your brokenness. You are allowed to sit silently in rooms where you no longer resonate, without guilt. Because Allah is not just changing your heart. He's changing your identity. Not in the eyes of the world, but in the unseen. And as painful as it feels to be unseen by people, it's that Allah is finally letting you be seen by Him fully. So, if your identity feels misunderstood in familiar spaces, don't chase clarity from people who were only meant to witness your past. You're not disappearing. You're just shifting dimensions. from being who the world expects to becoming who Allah is preparing. And soon, you'll walk into a new space where you won't have to shrink or explain or justify. You'll just be. And they'll see you for exactly who you were always becoming. The whole time you were being misunderstood. 5. You're no longer afraid of the unknown. You're afraid of staying. You used to be terrified of letting go, terrified of walking into the unknown, terrified of what might happen if you took that step into a future that wasn't clear. You used to beg Allah for clarity, for signs, for proof. Ya Allah, if it's right for me, show me. Ya Allah, if I'm meant to move on, give me a I can't ignore. And He gave it. But not the way you expected. Not with lightning. Not with a voice from the sky. Not with someone holding your hand saying, "It's time to go." He answered, with heaviness, with restlessness, with a shift so quiet you didn't notice it at first. But now it's all you feel. You look around and everything is exactly the same. Same job, same people, same room, same air. But it no longer feels like yours. The peace is gone. The pull is gone. And every day you stay, you feel something inside of you slowly dying. And that's when it happens. The fear flips. You're no longer afraid of the unknown. You're afraid of staying. Because staying feels like suffocation, like betrayal, like putting your soul back in a box after Allah just started helping it breathe again. You know now, if you stay, you'll start pretending again. You'll start lowering your standards again. You'll start making excuses for why you're not growing, and calling it patience, when really, it's just fear. You'll keep telling yourself, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I'm just being ungrateful. Maybe I'm expecting too much from life. But your soul knows better. Your soul is awake now, and it's trying to protect you from a lifetime of spiritual regret. It's not pride. It's not ego. It's clarity. You've seen too much, felt too much, been through too much, to pretend you can survive in a place you've already outgrown. You know what it's like to walk through pain, to rebuild from nothing, to cry on prayer mats at 3 a.m., begging Allah to show you the way. And now that He's answering, He's not pushing you towards something new. He's pulling you out of something you should have left long ago. You're not scared of being alone anymore. You're scared of being surrounded and still empty. You're not scared of failing anymore. You're scared of succeeding at a life that isn't even yours. You're not scared of not knowing what's next. You're scared of knowing exactly what will happen if you stay and choosing it anyway. Because deep down, you've already seen the price of staying still, of staying silent, of staying in places Allah has already started removing your soul from. And that's the secret no one talks about. Sometimes fear is not your enemy. Sometimes fear is the most spiritual thing you'll feel. Because it's not fear of the dark. It's fear of the wrong light, the fake comfort, the recycled routine, the version of you that knows how to survive in brokenness but no longer wants to. You've outgrown your cage. You just haven't realized you're free yet. And that tug you feel every time you stay in a space that no longer reflects your soul, that's not anxiety. That's divine urgency. It's Allah whispering, "Go. I've already walked ahead of you. Move. I'll catch your fall. Trust. I never meant for you to build a life in a hallway. I only used to teach you how to walk. So, if you feel like you're being pulled, but you're afraid of what's ahead, remember this. The unknown is not your enemy anymore. The real danger is pretending you're still at peace in a place where Allah has already removed your barakah. Staying will cost you more than leaving ever will. Because when Allah removes peace from something, it's His way of saying, I love you too much to let you stay here any longer. So breathe and move, even if it's slow, even if it's scary, even if your hands are still shaking. Because what's ahead is not just the unknown, it's the answered prayer you forgot you asked for, on that night when no one saw you crying but Him. And it's waiting for you to leave the old behind. 6. You're no longer addicted to being chosen by them. There was a time you would have done anything just to be chosen. Anything. You would lower your tone, hide your pain, silence your needs, just to keep the peace. Just to stay close to someone who made you feel like love was something to earn. You would stay quiet even when your soul was screaming. You would compromise your values just to feel valued. You would shapeshift, become what they liked, act how they wanted, just to hear them say, you're important to me. You lived for the crumbs. A late-night message. A random compliment. A half-hearted apology. It was never enough. But somehow, it kept you hoping. Because being chosen felt like proof that you were worth something. And even when you were tired, exhausted from performing, waiting, proving, you'd keep going. You feared that if you stopped trying, they'd forget you ever mattered. You weren't addicted to them. You were addicted to belonging, to the feeling of finally being someone's favorite, to the illusion that maybe, this time, you'd be picked and kept. But over time, something in you started breaking. Not loudly, not all at once, but quietly, softly, in the way your heart stopped racing when their name popped up, in the way your soul started sighing more than smiling around them, in the way you stopped checking your phone after every conversation, in the way you began to feel peace, not when they answered, but when they didn't. And at first, you thought you were becoming cold, detached, maybe even bitter. But you weren't. You were healing, because Allah was doing what only He can do. He was breaking the addiction to being chosen by people so He could show you what it feels like to be chosen by Him. He watched you give your best to people who gave you their bare minimum. He saw how many times you watered dead plants, hoping they'd grow into love. How many times you stayed loyal to souls who only remembered you when they needed comfort. He saw how deeply you wanted to be seen, so He slowly started removing the need. At first, it felt like loss. Why aren't they calling? Why don't they ask how I'm doing? Why do I feel invisible again? But it wasn't abandonment. It was detox. You were being unhooked from the need to be validated by the ones who only valued your presence when it benefited them. You were being pulled away from the illusion that your worth depended on how well you performed for people who never really saw your soul. And as He pulled you away, you began to stand up straighter, not in arrogance but in quiet awareness. You started seeing who checked on you without needing something. You started speaking without shrinking. You started praying without asking for someone else's name. And you realized something you were never taught. You were never meant to be addicted to being chosen by people. You were meant to choose yourself with Allah's name on your chest. Because when you are chosen by Him, you stop begging to be picked by those who don't even understand your value. You stop waiting for closure from people who were only meant to trigger your awakening. You stop being available to those who are only interested in the old version of you that tolerated their emotional absence. And instead, you start moving with calm, not needing to be in the center of their world, not trying to prove that you deserve love, not asking for permission to be enough, because you are enough. And now you finally believe it. Not because someone said so, but because Allah showed you. He showed you by letting you survive the silence. He showed you by giving you a new type of peace, not the one that comes from being chosen by people, but the one that comes from finally choosing yourself in His light. So no, you're not cold. You're not broken. You're not unlovable. You're just free. And that freedom, that sacred distance from the version of you who used to beg to be seen, that is your sign. You are no longer addicted to being chosen by them, because the one who created your soul already chose you long ago. And once you taste that kind of love, you'll never trade it again for someone else's approval. Not ever. 7. The place you thought was your future starts haunting your memory. You thought that place was your future. That person. That city. That circle. That path. You mapped your life around it. You dreamed in its language. You prayed to Allah, not asking if it was yours, but when. You pictured the home, the conversations, the milestones. It felt so certain, so obvious. How could it not be written when your heart beat for it so deeply? But now, that place doesn't just feel far, it feels haunting. Not in a terrifying way, but in that quiet, aching, surreal kind of way, where the memories don't bring you peace anymore. Just confusion. You remember their voice. You remember your excitement. You remember the version of you who used to feel alive there. And it plays on repeat in your mind, like an echo that won't leave. But instead of comfort, it leaves behind a strange kind of sorrow. A weight. A pause. A tension in your chest you can't explain. And you wonder, why do I still miss it, but feel worse every time I think about it? Why does it still visit me in dreams, but leave me tired when I wake up? The answer is hard to accept, but beautiful once understood. That place wasn't your future. It was your lesson. And Allah is trying to help you remember it accurately. You see, when something breaks our heart but was once our hope, the mind romanticizes it. It edits out the pain. It adds filters to the memories. It turns red flags into, maybe I misunderstood. It makes the laughter louder than the silence you had to swallow. But your soul remembers the truth. It remembers the moments you ignored your gut just to stay. It remembers the prayers you whispered while pretending everything was fine. It remembers how heavy your chest felt when you looked strong on the outside, but was silently begging Allah to fix something that kept crumbling. And now Allah is doing something sacred. He's not just pulling you away from the place. He's reprogramming how you remember it. He's allowing the memory to feel heavier, not to punish you, but to make sure you don't return to what almost broke you. Because if He lets you keep romanticizing that path, you'll delay the one He's been preparing. The one that matches your real worth, not your wounded desire. He knows how badly you wanted it to work. He knows how loyal your heart was, how deeply you tried, how many signs you overlooked just to protect the dream. But the truth is, you were trying to build a future in a space Allah only meant for temporary transformation. And now, every time you remember it, it doesn't feel like home anymore. It feels like a closed door you keep trying to reopen, with a key that no longer fits. That is not failure. That is release. Because when Allah starts haunting a memory, it's His way of protecting your future, of making sure you don't fall in love again with a version of your past that never truly loved you back in your full truth. You were enough. You just weren't meant to be enough there. And now your soul knows it. That's why the memory weighs differently. That's why it makes your heart ache, even when you smile at it. That's why it feels like looking through glass. You can see it, but can't touch it. And even if you could, you're not sure you'd survive it again. So, if the place you once called your future now lingers in your mind like a shadow that never rests, don't run from it. Don't fight it. Understand it. It is Allah slowly, lovingly, removing the illusion from the picture, not to erase your past, but to protect your future, because you cannot carry divine purpose while clinging to a path that was only meant to break you open. And if you still feel sad, if you still cry, if part of you still whispers, "What if?" just remember, the real what if is this. What if Allah is saving you from a version of happiness that would have cost you your peace, your identity, and your soul? So let it fade. Let the memory ache. Let the illusion dissolve. Because sometimes, when the past haunts you, it's only because Allah is making space for a future that will finally feel like home. Not a dream you forced, but a destiny you were always meant to walk into, without begging for it to choose you back. 8. You wake up feeling lighter, without knowing why. You didn't notice the shift at first, because there were no fireworks, no signs in the sky, no voice whispering, "It's over now, you've healed." There were just slow mornings, heavy nights, silent prayers, and days that all started to blur together like you were moving through fog with no clear direction, just quiet survival. You kept waking up tired. Tired in the kind of way that doesn't go away with sleep. Tired in your bones. Tired in your chest. Tired in your soul. The pain didn't speak anymore. It just sat in you still and uninvited like background noise to your existence. And then, without warning, one morning felt different. You opened your eyes, and it wasn't that everything was fixed, but something inside you felt softer, lighter, quieter. You weren't drowning in your thoughts anymore. You didn't feel that sharp, invisible ache in your chest. You didn't wake up replaying their name, or wondering what went wrong, or blaming yourself again for things you now realize were never your fault. You didn't cry that morning, and not because you were numb, but because, for the first time in a long time, your soul didn't feel so heavy, and you couldn't explain it. You didn't do anything different. You didn't receive a closure text. You didn't get back what you lost. You didn't finally get an apology. But something inside of you had shifted, and you realized that while you were breaking, Allah was building. While you were aching, Allah was aligning. While you were stuck in survival mode, Allah was quietly, lovingly carving out your healing beneath the surface. You didn't notice it, because healing rarely announces itself. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't warn you when the pain is almost over. It doesn't tap you on the shoulder and say, "You made it." It just shows up one day as peace, as lightness, as breath, as clarity so quiet you almost miss it. But it's real. You survived. You survived the nights you thought you wouldn't. You outlived the version of yourself who begged to be chosen, who cried every night for clarity, who couldn't imagine a day without that person, that place, that dream. And now, you've woken up lighter. Not because life finally gave you what you wanted, but because Allah removed what you didn't need. He removed the false hopes, the hidden dependencies, the soul ties that were never meant to last. He took the pain you couldn't carry anymore, not all at once, but piece by piece, moment by moment, night by night. He heard every, "Ya Allah, please help me," you whispered into your pillow. He saw how you smiled for others with tears still burning behind your eyes. He watched you hold on to him when everything else was falling apart. And even when you thought he was silent, he was rewriting your heart in the background, restoring what you didn't know was broken, replacing what you didn't realize was empty. And now, you've stepped into a version of yourself that feels lighter, not perfect, not invincible, but real. peaceful, ready, ready to stop carrying what was never yours, ready to move forward without needing permission from your past, ready to receive what Allah has prepared because you finally made space for it. And that lightness you feel, that's not coincidence. That's divine reward. That's what healing feels like when it finally reaches your soul. So, if you've woken up feeling lighter, without knowing why, trust it, because this is the moment you spent months praying for, the moment you didn't think would come, the moment your soul starts to feel what your du'as have been building in silence. And the best part? You didn't have to beg anyone to save you, because Allah was saving you all along. My dear, you didn't imagine it. You weren't being dramatic. You weren't broken for no reason. You were being moved with divine precision and sacred protection. The people who drifted, the places that lost their peace, the dreams that felt so close but slipped away, none of it was rejection. It was redirection. Because Allah never removes you without preparing something more pure, more aligned, more healing, more deserving of the version of you He's been quietly rebuilding. You're not behind. You're not late. You're not missing out on anything that was truly written for you. He had to break your attachment to the temporary before He could guide you to the eternal. And now that your hands are finally empty, He can fill them with what your soul was always meant to carry. So leave the old behind. Let the illusions fade. Let what ended stay ended. Because what's coming will not require you to shrink, to beg, to question your worth ever again. You're not falling apart. You're just being relocated by Allah to a place that won't break you again. And when you arrive, your soul will finally whisper, This is what I was being prepared for all along.